I wanted to introduce Lisa Machado. She's a former financial journalist who, after being diagnosed with a rare leukemia in 2008, now writes about the patient experience and the challenges of living with the illness. She is the founder of the Canadian CML Network and the author of the award-winning Living Well with CML: What You Need to Know to Live Your Best Life with Chronic Myelogenous Leukemia. Lisa has been interviewed by CTV News, Rogers Media, and on the CBC on what it means to live with a serious chronic illness. She has also been featured in a number of newspaper articles and has written for the Caregiver Network and the Cure magazine. Lisa writes a blog, cmlnetwork.ca.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out on a Saturday morning to talk about cancer. It's so exciting. Yes, my name is Lisa Machado. I wanted to say thank you so much to Megan and the LLS for having me out. I actually flew in from Toronto, left snow and brought a nice bulky winter jacket for a rainstorm here. So thank you very much, Megan, for having me. And also a big thanks to Al for making all of this happen. I met Al a couple of years ago, which feels like forever. But a couple of years ago in Toronto, we had a coffee and I loved Al from the moment that I met him for two reasons. First of all, he, sat down and he just laid everything out there. He had just been diagnosed with CML and, he was a man shocked by a life-threatening diagnosis and one that I had faced in 2008. The other thing that really stood out for me with Al was that he wanted to make a difference already. It had only been, a few months into his diagnosis, and he had already recognized a whole bunch of holes that exist in our system for people who live with chronic cancer. And so to have this happen is something that we've been talking about for a long time. And so kudos to Al for having everybody here. And I'm so lucky and feeling incredibly grateful to being here today, to be able to be here today and see all of you. So thank you for coming. So a little bit about me. I was diagnosed in 2008, and like Libby, I had young children at the time, and I thought I was going to die. And I often say to people that a cancer diagnosis is really, really bad, but it's worse when you have little people in your lives, right? I often think that had I been by myself, I think I would have been able to focus on different things, but the only thing I could focus on was leaving my children, and that was definitely the most terrifying part of everything. And one of the things that I really struggled with actually was the whole idea of living and then cancer. So CML, a chronic leukemia that generally most people live well with. A small portion of the community go on to have stem cell transplants, but generally we live well on medication. And I remember sitting that day with the doctor, and he said, so you have the lucky leukemia. And I'm like, wow, I can't imagine a leukemia ever being lucky. But anyways, he kept talking about, well, you can live with this. You can, you're going to be at work and you're going to be fully functioning and it's all going to be good. And what I really struggled with was this whole idea of, well, how can you live with cancer, right? Because cancer means that you die, doesn't it? And, when I would tell people, they would say exactly that. Oh my God, like, what's going to happen to you? I'm like, oh, well, I don't even know myself. And I struggled for a really long time, probably for about a good year. Going into my doctor, I was in remission really, really soon, which was amazing. But I would go in and I'd say, I need a plan. I want a stem cell donor guy lined up for me just in case. And he'd be like, no, you're going to be fine. Everyone that I treat with CML or chronic cancers that have a treatment, they're all fine. They go back to living their life. And I was like, wow, really? And I started to think that there was something really wrong with me. So one day I said to him, I'm going to make a bet with you. So I want to meet someone else with CML. If they are fully functioning and not worried and not anxious, and like Libby referred to, worrying about stuff happening in your body, if I can meet someone else with CML who completely has forgotten that they have CML, then I am going to get on some good medication and get a really good therapist. So he shook my hand that day and he said, thank God, we're totally going to have this bet. And he was amazing. And we went old school. We put posters up in cancer clinics, and we gathered a small group of people living with CML. And so, we sat down, and within 5 minutes, everyone's crying. They're crying, in fear and anxiety and depression. And I remember leaning over to one of the nurses that was with me, and I said to her, these people must have just been diagnosed, right? And she's like, I don't know. And so after we get to know each other, and they'd been living with, most of them had been living with CML for 5 years or more. And I remember sitting there thinking, that's not going to be me. I don't want to be 10 years, 15 years into a disease that you can live with, but devastated and paralyzed with emotional issues like depression and anxiety. And we started to talk about how difficult it is, and many of you will understand this, to live with a chronic cancer or go through a diagnosis. And even though you might be given, the closure, the little goodbye closure things from your doctor, it's still never done, right? It's changed my life forever. I no longer, take holidays with my children for granted. It's taken me a long time to stop grieving for the life that I had before, where you didn't know about all this cancer stuff, and you didn't know what the potentials are. And so coming to terms with living with the uncertainty has been a really big challenge for me. And it's what's led to the creation of the Canadian CML Network, actually. So just a quick few things. We're based in Toronto. We do support groups and educational conferences. We often have funding to fly people in. So if anyone's interested, come out to Toronto and see us in May. So this whole idea of living with cancer, this is sort of how the diagnosis process goes with CML, where the doctor says, you know what, we'll just keep an eye on it. Don't worry about it. And meanwhile, you're like, oh my God, I'm definitely going to die. Some of the things we work on, support and education and advocacy. We have there's a lot of media coverage for CML. I've written a book, which is there. I'm just going to speed through. World CML Day, which happens in September, which is Blood Cancer Awareness Month. We've also just recently started a transplant survivors group, because we are seeing a lot of people who have transplants, and then you have, got through the transplant process, which is a crazy process in itself. And then after, it's like, now what, right? Your life has changed completely. You're dealing with physical issues, but also the emotional issues. And we found in our little world in Toronto anyway, that there are a lot of patients, a lot of people who've survived transplants and can't really find a place for themselves. And so we started a community for transplant survivors. And I think that there's, one thing I just want to say before I wrap up is, so I've been doing this since 2008, which is forever ago. And I've met a lot of people, and some of my best moments is seeing someone who is completely devastated and has never met anyone with the same disease. And then they meet that person with the same disease, and then life changes like this. And so I'm thinking that after today, if you came with a lot of burden and, feeling like, oh my gosh, it's amazing I even woke up this morning and I'm on my 2 feet, that when you leave today, you will feel amazing. And so the 3 things that I have learned through my own experience, and also from watching people sort of do this amazing thing that happens when you meet in a community like this. So the first thing is that you need, in order to move forward, is relationship with your healthcare provider. Right? So if you can't sit down with your doctor and have a frank conversation, and when I say frank, I mean, you want to be telling him or her about how you're feeling. Medication's not working. Yeah, you need to tell. You can't live on your medication. It's making you feel terrible. You can't get up and walk your kids to school, whatever. You need to have those conversations with your doctor, because you're not going to have the best health care that you need and what you deserve. So get another doctor. The second thing I want to say, and I often say, I call it finding your crazies. And so, you need You need that person that you can call at 3 a.m. in the morning or knock on their door and say, you know, I've got this pain in my toe. I think it's cancer. I'm going to die. You need someone who you can have that conversation with, and they'll totally understand and not laugh at you. And the third thing, which is my absolute favorite and a total passion of mine, is finding your peeps, right? And so find the people who you can talk about that pain in your toe, and you can talk about the pain of feeling like you're going to, leave your children, which until you receive a diagnosis like this, you never, ever actually really know what that feels like. People who know what it means to, not know if you're going to be at your kid's graduation or be able to get married or have children. In these kinds of safe spaces is where this is the place to let it all out and to take what you need from this to move forward with positivity and with what it's going to take to make sure that you live your best life. Because the fact that you're even sitting here is a total gift, and it would be a shame to not take advantage of that. So I know I'm totally over time, but I just need to tell one quick story. Can I do that? Okay, quick. And I'm only going to tell this story because I was speaking to someone earlier this morning who has AML about some challenges that she was having and how alone and isolated that she felt. And so when I first started doing the CML network thing and meeting people, and I was still very fragile in my own, trying to figure out where I fit in with this whole CML thing and living with cancer. And so we had this group meeting. And we were all talking about, everyone introduces themselves. They talk about what medication they're on and how long, they've been diagnosed for and their challenges and whatever. And so this couple comes in, and they're about probably in their 60s. So the woman, little woman, and she's wearing flip-flops, middle of summer, and her feet are so swollen, like they're like these big bricks of cheese, sort of. And her husband's walking in, and he's all grumpy, and you can tell he hates his life, and he doesn't want to be there. And he sits down, and she sits down, and she's introducing herself, and then she starts to cry. And he's like looking at her going, oh my God, here we go again. And she's trying to, get her story out, and all she can say is, I used to be a champion square dancer. This is all that I live for. I have 5 kids, but I got this, I'm swelling and I feel terrible. And the doctor says I have this lucky leukemia. And she goes on and on and on. And then all of a sudden, and there's always this little piece of magic that happens in a community setting when you're with your peeps. And this guy turns around and passes her a box of Kleenex. Okay, little thing, but big thing. She takes it. She's like trying to gather herself together. Someone else says, when I was first diagnosed, I had that swelling in my feet too. And then I changed to this medication, but then I also went and saw a physiotherapist, and then this whole discussion starts happening. And then she stops crying, and he's actually smiling. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And then grumpy husband, starts to kind of relax a little bit. He's feeling like this is going to be okay. And maybe someone has a solution for the life that suddenly turned crap for him, like he never signed up for that. And right. So we're getting good. And then I didn't hear from her for a really, really long time. And then about 7 months, I would say 7 months later, summer, we had a CML barbecue thing. And she walks in. Okay. So picture this. Crisp white suit, patent red high heels, and, a big champion square dancing medal on her chest. And she had started dancing again, and she just had won a gold medal. And grumpy husband was still a little grumpy, but not as grumpy as he was. But I guess my point is that, this is not going to go anymore, but I just want to get that last, So the point is that, first of all, community is super important, and it's where you're going to get your power and your strength from. So glad you guys came out this morning. And we've just recently changed our, we had this whole living well theme. Now we have more, it's more of this is going to be our focus. So we're not done yet until, and this goes for everyone, not just people living with CML, until every treatment works, until everyone gets the test they need, until there's no uncertainty, until everyone can afford their medication, until no one needs a transplant, until everyone lives well, until no one dies, and until there's a cure for every leukemia, right? So thank you very much for having me.